Hello, I'm Frank Luna, and welcome to Making Space, bringing you interesting and inspiring news stories from Phoenix's LGBTQ community on Arizona Barrio Stories through the Latino USA TV and Media Network family. Today, I'm excited to feature a very important topic, barrio innovation and AZ land, a study in environmental justice and advocacy for underrepresented communities. Our guest today to talk about the subject is Mr. Reggie Carrillo, founder and CEO of AZ Land, an innovative nonprofit organization Reggie and his team have created that emerged after years of collaborative study among several research entities, including ASU, the Friendly House, Charter School, Academia del Pueblo. Welcome, Reggie, and thank you for joining us today. Before we get started talking about the program, can you please share with our audience a bit about your childhood and growing up? I understand that you're a fifth-generation Arizonan.
Yeah.
Tell us where you grew up and some of the things that interested you as a child and some of your biggest influences, some of those types of things.
Yeah. First of all, Frank, I want to say a huge thank you, much gratitude to Arizona Body Stories for having me on and featuring me and the work I do with AZ Land on the program. And it's not too often that queer people of color are featured and being included in these spaces and on these tables. So a huge thank you. And to answer the question, just in terms of my own childhood where I grew up, I had a very formative childhood. I grew up in Mirage, Surprise Arizona.
Oh, wow.
But I also say I grew up everywhere else because that goes into my story and why and how AZ Land was founded and my familiarity and my love for the desert and for Arizona State. And so I grew up in Mirage, Surprise Arizona, historically Black and brown community, historically underinvested community. Little did I know it when I was a child. I had a wonderful childhood though, right? I grew up with parents that had me very active in the community. I grew up with strong Latina presence that had me very politically and civically active. And we did folklorico, I did sports. We went all around the valley to perform. And then I was a product of the public education system. Both my parents worked for Desert Unified School District, and so I spent all my years at the Desert Unified School District learning and just being guided by great public school educators who are still my champions today.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. We had talked prior to the interview. I know that your father had quite an influence on you, but you also had quite a strong matriarchy around you growing up in your life.
Yeah, talking about my mom is just being very vulnerable. My childhood, I grew up in a two-parent income household. Right before my 13th birthday, my mom, 5 months before my 13th birthday, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And again, like I said, I grew up with a very formative Latina presence. And my mom had us very civically, politically active. And I was previously a school board member. I ran to be a school board member. However, I remember when I was a child, my mom rallying all the kids in the barrio and rallying my cousins and getting us to write speeches, to make speeches in front of school board members at Desert Unified School Districts. And that topic was really fighting to have a new school built on the other side of the tracks because families at that time were having to walk across the tracks to get to another school. And little did I know, we were making these speeches and advocating for a new school to be built. And I saw grown men crying and advocating for a park to be built. And I just saw, when I look back in retrospect and able to parse the fact that we were pit against each other for a green space, a park that people loved, and having a school. That's the type of community I grew up in. And my mom, as a parent, as a community advocate, she provided that foundation for me to know that my voice mattered, that I can make a difference. At times, we do have to make hard choices, right? And that's just one experience that speaks to why I am the way I am, why I've ran to be a school board member, why AZ Land has founded, and why we do the work that we do. And again, just having a mom being the matriarch, being the one that carries our family, and it's very much integrated in my story. When she was diagnosed with cancer, a week before my birthday, we were putting her in the ground, and my childhood ended right there. And going into high school, we went from a 2-income household to a 1-income household. And so we became transient because there was a lot of new learnings for my father. I love my father. I credit him for my love of the environment, for the desert, for camping, for hunting, and just knowing about Flagstaff, places like this, which is all integrated into AZ Land, caring about our environment and being great stewards of the environment. However, there was a lot of new learnings for him, having to pay the bills, and so that's why I say I grew up in Island Valley, became transient, still public education remained the constant stability in my life and my Nana's house.
Sure.
And from there, I went to college, and I became a research assistant, and then became an educator. Yeah.
So you had quite a journey in the formative years, and had politics really instilled in you. It sounds like from your family.
Yeah.
That's great. Let me ask you, if you want to, let's segue a little bit into AZ Land, and let's spend the next few minutes talking about AZ Land and the concept of barrio innovation. In layman terms, explain to the audience for us, what is AZ Land and barrio innovation to our audience? I know that you, prior to that, you were kind of building your resume, getting your education and that kind of things, and you spent quite a few years in education as a teacher. And then you had your aha moment when you decided to really dive into this concept of environmental justice and advocacy to help the community. And that,
Yeah, so to talk about AZ Land is to just reference my personal lived experience. Again, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I was always taught that you engage in these individual risk factors and that affects your health, and that wasn't the case for my mom. So those were years, and I credit Zora Neale Hurston, those were years that begged of questions, and why did my mother and why do so many people in our communities deal with these health disparities, diabetes, asthma, right, cancer? And so for my mom, she wasn't a smoker, she wasn't a drinker, no one in my family was. And so I was asked the question, why did she have to deal with this? Why do we have to deal with this? And then it wasn't until I got to college and to finish off the rest of that Zora Neale Hurston quote, then there are years that provide answers, and it does take time, and that's the fullity of the quote. And in college, I was able to access that information, get deeper understandings of my own cultura, of my own history, right, of being a Mexican, of being queer, and our icons that are related to both of those identities that I have. And realizing that my community, the way it looks, the issues that we deal with, it's tied to, because I studied global public health, it's tied to our natural and built environments. It's really the health issues that we're suffering from, that we're impacted, is really a cause. Yes, our individual factors play a small percentage of that and contribute to that, but it's really metaphorically and literally speaking, it's what's in the water, what's in the environment, natural and built environments. And it's one of the reasons why man-made situation, we're dealing with urban heat islands, dealing with extreme heat, right? But it's also another reason why Phoenix is the 6th most polluted city in the nation, that we're dealing with high cases of asthma. And so when I got to college, I was able to access that information, and really it sparked a moment in me like, oh, it's the environment that is affecting our health, right? And then from there, understanding the history of our communities, our communities have so long been underinvested, have not been given the proper resources we needed to thrive. Yes, we're surviving, and we're doing a great job at surviving, but so many of our communities lack a lot of important assets that can contribute to increasing our life expectancy, increasing the amount of time we are able to spend outside and enjoy the recreations that other and amenities that other communities deal with. And so I speak to that because when I got to college, that inspired me to become an educator, to be able to provide this level of education I received in college to my students. I became an educator. When I was a middle school educator, I was a social studies history teacher. And again, I wanted to provide this level of education to my students. I knew I wasn't an expert in everything. Right? I could teach. I knew about health, public health. I knew about the environment. But I wanted people to come in and teach about the research part. I wanted people to come in and teach about ideating and prototyping and design and development. And I wanted organizers to come in and teach about how do we turn these visions, these solutions, and who do we have to go to make sure they become tangible realities. And so from there, in the classroom, AZ Land, the Green Space Project, was born. And so as an educator, I worked with these professionals, with ASU, with academia, with my students, with environmental justice organizations, and we ultimately realized that nature-based solutions, planting native desert trees, being very intentional, would ameliorate so many issues. And when we looked back and reflected on our work, we ideated and developed the body innovation approach. And so ultimately, because of the momentum we were getting, we said, let's form this into a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And let's continue to work and build out this framework. So to answer your question, the body innovation approach is our theory of change. It's how we operate. It's the guidance in which we work to co-create environmentally and racially just communities with historically impacted communities. Yeah. And so there's 4 pillars that the body innovation approach focus on, which is a focus on education, research and data collection, future building, designing and developing resilient and sustainable communities, and action and advocacy. And so that makes up our 4 program focus areas. Yeah.
And I have to tell our audience that you've spent substantial amount of time with your collaborative partners in the university, ASU, and various different areas of the university in researching and gathering data and studying it before, as you conceptualized AZ Land, which is very impressive. And so it's really a grounded theory in how you put everything together, which is very admirable and respectable. You spent, as I said, with the partners in studying it. So hats off to you in coming up with that and then grounding it within our community as well and our gente, you know. So it's very valuable data for anybody to look at. Do you have a primary service area or a defined, identified audience, or right now where you're situated?
Yeah.
Within the framework that you've started?
Yeah, so AZLand really was birthed out of the classroom because as an educator, I saw that there was a need for there to be education that taught our students about their community, about the environment, and about these health impacts and health disparities. And so our focus was with educators, working in the public education system, working with students, elevating this knowledge in the classroom, but also outside the classroom. So we not only just work with educators, students, we really realize that not everyone is able to access this learning in the classroom or being in university, right? So we work to step beyond the 4 walls of the classroom and work with community members. And so specifically, we work with historically underinvested, impacted community members, Black and Brown communities, right? Urban communities, and regionally, Sonoran desert communities.
Right.
AZLand is hyper-focused on working with communities in the desert and teaching about the benefits of the desert.
Yeah, and if I may share, which this is probably one of the many things that has impressed me about what you've done in the organization and your the folks that are working with you. When you started the nonprofit organization, AZLand, you actually physically moved into the area. And you uprooted yourself from your home at another part of the valley and have bought property in the area that you're serving right now and working with the neighbors. The neighbors, the folks that you're helping are actually your neighbors physically. And talk about putting your money where your mouth is, as they say. I think as far as credibility and trying to help your clients, the people that you're trying to serve, can't do any better than that.
And to that I would say I was taught to instill with the mindset to leave the barrio, to get out of our community, right? That was a measure of success. That was an indicator of success. That's why I went to ASU. It's why I want to work for philanthropy to make this money. And but then I realized that in the work that I do, and I remember this quote, I am what I do, and I don't want to be disconnected from my community issues and disparities.
You have to be among the community to do the work. One last question I definitely want to ask is if people watching this interview would like to help with AZLand or get involved, what's your greatest need, or how can they contact you, Reggie, or the organization?
So our greatest need as an organization is funding. We're an emergent organization, and so a lot of funding we get is from grants, but we're working to enable people, empower people to become environmental advocates, warriors, stewards, and in that, so one small way they can do that is through donating. So they can go through our azlnd.org website and make a donation to help us continue and have a stronger impact in the work that we're doing, addressing these environmental inequities and navigating the climate crisis. And then also on our website, they can fill out our contact form to get in touch with us. And we have a whole host of events coming up every Saturday up until May We have an event focused on air pollution, raising awareness about air pollution, and an event focused on urban heat islands. So you can view all that on our website.
Okay. Well, folks, you heard the man. There's plenty of opportunity to get involved. If you're interested in getting involved with AZ Land and Reggie and his team, please take a look at that website. I want to thank everybody for being here today and joining us for this great conversation. And Reggie, thank you for being with us today. Until next time, thank you.